Okay, so we are starting chapter 37. Today is the 23rd of Adar, Thursday, Likutei Amorim, chapter 37. The previously described messianic utopia, where God's infinite light is manifest on earth, is in fact effected by divine design, of course by virtue of our labor in these times, for in truth each mitzvah is a microcosm of that same achievement, introducing godliness into a previously foreign entity. This is especially so with action-based mitzvahs. So chapter 37, in the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe explained that the statement of the sages that God desired an abode in the lower realms refers to our physical world. This is the lowest of worlds in terms of the degree of revelation of the divine creative power. It is hidden in this world as it is in no other world. God desired precisely this world, pervaded as it is with doubled and redoubled darkness, as his abode, where his presence would ultimately be revealed to a greater degree than it is revealed in the higher worlds, without any concealing garments whatsoever. So we are aiming for much greater revelation that is being done in the higher world to be revealed in this world. This will come to pass in the Messianic era, the period for which the world was originally created for these times, Messianic times, when godliness will be manifest throughout the world, so that all the nations on earth will experience divine revelation. So read the Hebrew. Now this ultimate perfection of the Messianic era and the time of the resurrection, meaning the revelation of the Ein Sof light in this physical world, it depended on our actions and divine service throughout this time, the time of exile. Unlike the aforementioned revelation at Sinai, which was initiated by God, the revelation of the time of Golus, the time of exile, is dependent on us. For it is the mitzvah itself that creates its reward. Schar mitzvah and mitzvah atzmo. Ki b'asiyoso, by performing the mitzvah, man draws the revelation of the blessed Ein Sof from above downward. To be closed in the physicality of this world, which means in an object which had heretofore been under the dominion of Klippas Noiga and had received its vitality from this Klippa. So it needs to be enclosed in the physicality of this world, something that was under the domination of a neutral power. Klippas Noiga would mean neutral power, and it receives its vitality from this klippa, from this concealment. Namely, all pure, permissible object with which the act of the mitzvah is performed. By performing the mitzvah, man draws the Ein Sof light upon the object which it is performed. The Alter Rebbe now illustrates his phrase pure, permissible object with which the act of the mitzvah is performed, citing as examples one object from each of the three categories: animal life, vegetative, and inanimate life. For example, klaf, atfilin, mezuzah, v'sefer Torah. For example, the parchment of the tefillin, mezuzah, and sefer Torah, which must be made of the skins of permissible kosher animals. as our sages state in Tractate Shabbos, for the work of heaven, i.e. mitzvah object, only that which is pure and permissible to eat may be used. Similarly, an esrog which is not ola. The forbidden fruits of a tree's first three harvests. The first, if it's at least the fruits have to be 3 years old, at least three harvests until you can have a non-ola fruits. So if the esrog is not ola, you can use it. If it's ola, you cannot use it. In reference to this, to his earlier stipulation that an esrog not be ola and that charity be honestly acquired, the Alter Rebbe notes that ola is of the 3 completely unclean husk and shells that can never ascend into holiness. As it is written in Eitz Chaim, fruit which is ola, deriving its vitality from these concealment, cannot be elevated by having a mitzvah performed with it. If it's not kosher, you cannot elevate it. Specifically with ola, which the husk and shell of ola is very coarse, is connected with the 3 impure husk and shells. And similarly, any mitzvah whose performance involved a transgression, God forbid, since the sinful act receives its vitality from the 3 completely unclean klippis, the concealments, coverings, the resulting mitzvah cannot elevate it. The example the Alter Rebbe brings is money that you give to charity that was stolen. Money given to charity that has not been acquired through theft and the like. Other physical object used in performing a mitzvah, all of which were previously in the realm of klipas neiga, which we said it's the neutral power, and as the Alter Rebbe conclude presently, are now merged into the divine will by serving the purpose of a mitzvah. When performed, however, with pure permissible object, when mitzvah is performed with pure and permissible object, the mitzvah elevates those object from klipas neiga, from being possibly used in the wrong way, to be united with the infinite light, as the Alter Rebbe continues. Now that it's being used to fulfill the commandment of God and His wish, then the vitality that is within the object is now is ascending, is being elevated and being nullified. That's the will of Hashem that is invested in them. The vitality within them ascends and is dissolved and absorbed into the blessed Ein Sof light, which is His will that is closed in the mitzvahs, the divine will that each mitzvah represents. For in a mitzvah there is no concealment of the countenance whatsoever to hide His light, preventing the object from being absorbed in this light. As stated earlier, wherever the Ein Sof stands, whenever the Ein Sof stands revealed, there is no separation from God. Everything is united with His light. In this case, the object with which the mitzvah, representing revelation of the will and light of the Ein Sof, is performed. Thus far, the Alter Rebbe has discussed the effect of a mitzvah on the objects used in its performance, the esrog, the parchments used for tefillin. He now discusses its effect on the power of a Jew's animal soul that is applied to do the mitzvah. So there is effect on the object and there is effect on the body. Similarly, the power of the vitalizing animal soul closed in the bodily limbs of a person who performs a mitzvah likewise closes itself in the deed of the mitzvah. And it ascends from the klipa. It becomes one, united with the sanctity of the mitzvah, which is the will of God. Uvotel be'erinsof baruch and becomes nullified to the will of God. The Alter Rebbe goes on to say that those mitzvahs involving speech alone likewise affect this revelation of the animal soul, even though here the animal soul's power is not brought to bear in the performance of any mitzvah. And even in the case of such mitzvahs as Torah study, reciting the Shema, prayer, and the like, the animal soul's power is elevated to holiness. Although they do not involve actual physical action which is under the dominion of Klippas Noiga, yet it is an accepted principle that thought, contemplation is never like dibur, is not like speech. And you're not fulfilling your obligation by just thinking about something, by not uttering the words. We need to utter the words. Unless he actually utters the words with his lips. And it also accepted, and the Gemara in Bava Metzia tells us, Akimas Fosa, moving one's lips, constitutes action. And such action, as the Rebbe notes, likewise stems from the vitality of the Klippas Noiga that is nourished by the animal soul, as does the actual body action spoken of earlier. But the divine soul cannot express itself with the physical lips, mouth, tongue, or teeth, the instruments of speech, except by way of the vitalizing animal soul, actually closing the organs of the body. In simple words, you have to use the body in order to do the mitzvah. You can't use your capability of speaking without using your animalistic soul. The divine soul is entirely spiritual, the body physical. Therefore, as explained in chapter 35, the divine soul cannot activate the body to perform a mitzvah except through the intermediary. What is the intermediary between the animalistic soul and the divine soul? The intermediary between the divine soul and the body, the intermediary is the animal soul, which on one hand is a soul, a spiritual life force, yet on the other hand is actually closed in the blood and the bodily organ. So it has the animalistic soul, it has a spiritual aspect to it, and it also has an animalistic aspect to it. Hence, the more forcefully one speaks words of Torah or prayer, the more of the animal soul's energy he introduces and closes in these words. Thereby, he converts more of the energy of the Klippa to holiness. The more energy you're putting into Torah, mitzvahs, and prayer, the more you're taking away from the side of Klippa. The more you're converting from Klippa from impurity to sanctity. That's why it's written in Tehillim by David HaMelech. King David said, this is also the meaning of the verse, all my bones shall declare. God, who is like you? Which means that the words of Torah and prayer must be said with all of one's bones, so that as much as possible of the body's energy be utilized in performing the mitzvahs. This is why the sages have said, if the Torah abides in all the 248 limbs, it is preserved. It is preserved in your memory. Otherwise, it is not preserved. Why? For forgetfulness in matters of Torah stems from the klippa of the body and vitalizing animal soul. derived from Klippas Noiga, which is sometimes absorbed into holiness. When it is absorbed into holiness, there is no longer any cause for forgetfulness. This is accomplished when one weakens their power, the power of body and animal soul, applying all their strength to the holiness of Torah and prayer. This then is the meaning of the aforementioned quotation. When one involves the energy of all 248 limbs in Torah study, it is preserved in his memory, for the klippa that causes one to forget has been weakened, because he used his entire body to do the Torah, the prayer, or the mitzvah. The reward of your performance of a mitzvah, this is a takeaway from today's essay. The reward of your performance of a mitzvah is just that, the performance of the commandment. You just revealed in that act that that item used for the commandment, that moment, and that physical act is truly divine. You just brought the world's messianic purpose one big step closer. Ruchim Tiyu will continue with the daily Parsha and Geula and Ein Yaakov.